Down at Moonlight Beach in Encinitas, Charlie Marvin reminisces about how it was when he first came to live on the bluffs above the beach.
When I first got here in the early 70s, I first came down in 1971, there was a tremendous amount of sand. We used to have sand out in front of our home, basically from about May until October, where we'd set up a beach volleyball court, like the court you see over there, flat, heavy sand.
But 10 years later, things changed.
And in 1982, 83, I think it was, we had the El Niños. The first really bad El Niños. We had two huge storms that took away a lot of the bluff.
Beaches in North County have been getting narrower and stonier. The only reason Moonlight Beach looks so sandy is because tons of sand were brought in to replenish it earlier this spring.
If you don't replenish it, we will not have beaches.
A few miles south in Fletcher Cove, Solana Beach City Manager David Ott explains why beaches are shrinking.
That's because of dams up our rivers, jetties on our oceans, parking lots that cover all the sand flow into them. So there's really not a natural resupply of sand. So as the waves crash in, they take the sand out and eventually take all the sand out.
Ott says Solana Beach has almost 2 miles of 80-foot bluffs, mostly made of rapidly eroding sandstone. He says boulders the size of Volkswagens have rolled onto the beach without any notice.
We've been very fortunate in Solana Beach that so far nobody has died. However, in Encinitas, somebody died several years ago just sitting on the beach watching their husband surf.
Private homeowners who could afford it have spent millions building seawalls to protect their properties. But Solana Beach has recently passed a new coastal land use plan that introduces a time limit on seawalls.
In the approved plan, the permit will be issued for 20 years and then be reevaluated for any changed conditions after those 20 years.
Some private property owners have sued over this 20-year time limit, which was introduced by the California Coastal Commission. In the long term, the Commission advocates a more realistic approach, moving property back from the cliffs, a strategy called managed retreat. But Encinitas attorney John Kahn sued the Coastal Commission and won earlier this year as he defended his client's right to replace a collapsed seawall and stairs.
They try to soft pedal it like, oh, well, it's just so we can reassess it in 20 years. But in my opinion, and obviously in the judge's opinion, that's not the case. This is a plan to basically try to prevent people from having seawalls after a certain amount of time and to deploy this idea of managed retreat, which hasn't really gone through the democratic process.
The days of shoring up the cliffs with seawalls like these may be numbered, in which case Plan B is replenishing the beach with millions and millions of tons of sand.
The Army Corps of Engineers will complete a study later this month on a plan to replenish beaches in Solana Beach and Encinitas over the next 50 years. It would start by spreading more than 1 million cubic yards of sand, more than 7 times more sand than in recent replenishment projects. One man who has his doubts about how dredging this much sand will affect marine life in Encinitas is marine biologist Dennis Lees.
You know, I'm not opposed to putting sand on the beach. My opposition relates to how much sand they're talking about digging up offshore.
Lees says he's found shells in the sand already deposited on the beach that show decades-old shellfish scooped up, animals that he says are an important part of the fisheries food chain.
They're very shiny inside. This is the coating I'm talking about here, which is what they call periostracum that grows on the outside of the shell. So this guy was alive. It's going to take what was the best and most productive areas and turn it into dead zones for in excess of 50 years.
Approval of the sand replenishment project may be fast-tracked. David Ott hopes the Army Corps and the Coastal Commission sign off on it later this summer.
Because there's probably no better poster child for a sand replenishment project in California than here in Solana Beach. And if we can't be successful here, it probably causes challenges for the rest of the state that may need some projects as well.
Even if the sand replenishment project is approved, there's the matter of cost, which Ott estimates is about $70 million over 50 years. He hopes federal and state budgets will foot most of that bill, but there's no telling whether shrinking budgets and the growing threat of sea level rise will make preserving our beaches and bluffs an increasingly difficult proposition. Alison St. John, KPBS News.